Welcome to the What's Your Revolution show, the show for men and the people who love them, where we discuss how men can find and embrace the revolution within themselves, where people can find and embrace the revolution within themselves. I am your host, Dr. Charles Corprew. What's good, revolutionaries? I hope all is well, and you are making your way and doing your thing. And as we say here all the time, that you are sitting and being loved in your community. That's what it's about, right? Finding and spending time, as my good brother Travis Batt says, Dr. Travis Batt says, you're finding time with your midwives and you are fulfilling your revolution. And we're excited to be able to help you. And in the coming months, you'll be able to learn how to really answer that question and then really get supported in fulfilling that revolution. So we're excited about creating this new course around answering the question of what's a revolution and then helping you fulfill that revolution. So stay tuned, because we're excited to make sure that we can reach our goal of 1 million people who have the ability to answer the question that we think is the most thought-provoking question of your life. I'm always excited about bringing like superstar guests on my show. And I say that, and revolutionaries, you're going to say all the time, you always bring in these damn men of Omega. Well, you know what? Guess what? These men of Omega are some of the most prolific people in various sectors across the world. All right, not just the States, across the world. And I like to say this, as our frat brother Jarvis DeBerry says, this is an ordinary show because I've got a superstar rock star Omega on the show who's been doing big things for years in the documentary film sector of the world. So I want to welcome to the show my good friend, award-winning, acclaimed documentary filmmaker. I don't know why I can't talk today, Byron Hurt. Dear brother, how are you?
I'm doing great, brother Corporal. How you doing?
I'm doing good, man. I'm
It's
doing
good
good.
to
I
see you.
appreciate.
It's been a while. It's good to see you, man.
Yeah. Little backstory for you revolutionaries. I met Byron when I was a professor at Loyola University, and I was an advisor to one of the groups. And we decided to bring Brother Hurt in because at that point in time, and you all know revolutionaries that my research and me being a professor, I studied masculinity. I studied hypermasculinity. And the group that I was working with was actually trying to make sure that we were dispelling the myths of hypermasculinity, that we were having these conscious conversations around what healthy masculinity looks like. And it was really from those conversations with those students, revolutionary, that I began to think about this revolution and this show as a
Mm.
means of having conversations about what healthy masculinity looks like on a daily, minute by minute, second by second basis. And we brought Brother Hurt in to really talk about his seminal work at the time, hip hop beyond beats and rhymes. And we had a wonderful session with the community there at Loyola, bringing him in to talk about the importance of the work. And we're going to talk about that today, importance of that seminal work and what it meant to have that document out at that period of time, because what it looked like, what hip hop looked like then, and we'll talk about that later on, and potentially what it looks like now, and how that work actually had an impact on masculinity, hyper masculinity, healthy masculinity, and what the hip hop genre is today. So, dear brother, thank you. I just wanted to give that little backstory. What's been going on with you? We like to do a little deep dive into our
Mhm.
folks. What's been going on? It's been 7 or 8 years since we've seen each other. Tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about what's been going on with you.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for having me on your show and including me as one of your guests. I listened to one of your previous shows, and it was just so powerful. The discussion that you're having around people and what their revolutionaries are, what their revolutionary is, I should say, and really the authenticity that you're bringing to the table, by having honest, forthright conversations is really important for us to have, especially as men and especially as Black men. And I will always remember you as somebody who treated me very warmly, and who treated me with a lot of hospitality when I came to visit. So it was really good to hear from you, and to receive the invite to be on your show. But in terms of what's been going on with me, brother, I have been very busy. I have been
Yes, you
very
have.
busy. Yeah, I've been very busy, and I've been making the rounds with a new film that I directed that took me 10 years to make.
Mm,
I say me, but it was really me and my team. Took quite a while for this film to get completed, and it aired on PBS in September. of 2022. It actually premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival in
Mm.
June of 2022. And I've been showing the film around the country at film festivals and community screenings and at colleges ever since. And I have a screening upcoming in Los Angeles at Cal State LA on Monday. So that's my next screening. But I've been very busy.
Right, right. Let's jump in. I mean, let's make sure folks know what it is, right? You actually, and I'm gonna get to our signature question, revolutionaries, in a few moments, but
Mm.
you took on a topic, right? For
Yeah.
you revolutionaries, I want you to understand this movie is called Hazing, right? Simply, capital letters, Hazing,
Yeah.
hazing. And just as I said at the outset of this show, Brother Hurt and I are members of the greatest fraternity in the world. We're member, men
Sir.
and members of Omega Psi Phi fraternity. And, I talk at length about, my love for our fraternity and many of the brothers, the Grand Basilis,
Mm.
both the current and past Grand Basilis have been on the show. And so it means something that is dear to both of us. But you took on a
Yeah.
topic that is, tough in nature. And I want to just do a little deeper dive with that. And, the simple question is why? Why take on this topic? As someone who pledged Omega Psi Phi fraternity, why this? Why now?
Well, with all of my films, I have to feel a real passion for the topic, for the subject matter, in order for me to take it on. And quite honestly, I was moved to make this film after first reading about the tragic death of a young man who was a fraternity member at Cornell University named George Daydoun, and his mom. His mom raised George by herself after George's father died. Um, and I read this story that was in the New York Times, and it just really touched me. I was on an airplane heading somewhere. I was probably heading to a screening or a speaking date somewhere in the country, and I had a New York Times. This will tell you how long ago this was. I had a hard copy of the New York Times in my hand on an airplane, which that sounds so ancient now at this
I know,
point. But
right? I know, right?
um, and I read this story, and bro, I was moved to tears. It just touched me so much, and because of I could see the themes of hypermasculinity throughout the story. It was one of the things that was left unsaid in the article, but it was for me because of my lens and because of my experiences dealing with the topic of masculinity for so many years. I could see it really clearly,
Yeah.
and I felt like at that time that I had the ability, the experience, the knowledge base, both as a leader in the field on the topic of masculinity and gender violence prevention, but then also as a member of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated with the experiences that I had going through my own pledge process. I felt like I could bring some insight to this topic that was very unique, but also illuminating, revealing, and also transformative for whoever watched the film. However, to be quite honest with you, just that article alone was not enough for me to take action and to begin the process of making the film. What really propelled me to actually speak out loud the fact that I wanted to make this my next film was the death of Robert Champion, who
Mm.
was a band member who was beaten to death by his bandmates at Florida A&M University. They were actually, um, well, I think that yeah, they were actually in Florida at that time, but he was from Georgia, and his bandmates beat him to death on a bus. And I saw that story in the news, and this was several months, I believe, after George Daydoun died, and that was the one that put it over the top for me.
Right. Right, brother. I just want to define some of our terms. So, my revolutionaries, because we have a cadre of people, there's a diverse people that listen to the show.
Hmm.
I'm going to let you. Can you define hazing? Like, can you put a critical definition to it as we look more into this?
Yeah. Well, There are many variations of the definition of hazing, but very simply, it's any um, activity that degrades, humiliates, embarrasses, causes any physical harm, or puts a person at physical risk, um, in order to become a member of an organization or a group, regardless of their willingness to participate.
Right.
That's a loose
Gotcha.
definition.
Right. Right. No,
Uh,
I definitely
so I think
appreciate
the
that.
key, yeah. So I think the key phrase there is regardless of one's participation or willingness to participate. I think that's really critical. And the reason why I say that is because what I learned over the process of making this film is that a lot of people dismiss or um, minimize the effect of hazing because people say, well, this person made the choice. This person wanted to join this group or fraternity or this team. And so if something happened, if things went wrong, then hey, they got what they deserved, right?
Mm,
So um, I think that's a really important piece of the definition.
right. Right. Bro, as I began thinking about, how do we have this conversation as again as two members of our beloved fraternity and
Yeah.
talking about this and something that is a part of our lives. Like
Mhm.
Omega is a part of my life every day, as I'm sure it is a part of my life, my experience. My line brother is in town, and the joy of seeing him. But we are galvanized by our experiences together. Our line is galvanized by our experiences together. And yes, we are celebrating a milestone. I want to give a shout out to Dr. Nathan Woodard, right? Right. There are 3 PhDs on our line now, and that's a significant milestone to be able to say that. So all of us are coming together to celebrate that, but
Yeah.
we're also galvanized by our experiences, right? Our the full breadth, and we were brought together by a significant experience.
Yeah.
And thinking about that, the first thing that as I thought about this is that in my head is like, well, brother Byron, you're spilling the tea, right?
Mhm.
That question is like, you're spilling the tea, right? And sometimes we get around the cookout, you're like, you're not supposed to spill the tea. But I want to say this before I ask the question is like, hazing is not only a part of Black fraternities and sororities. Hazing can be found in any organization, whether it be sports or military or regardless. If there's a group of people and there's an introduction or induction, as I want to say, hazing may be a part of that, right? Whether it's white, black, Hispanic, it can be a part of the ritualistic nature of becoming a part of an organization. So I definitely want to say that. But
Mhm.
back to that question is, what compelled Byron Hurt other than those teams? Was there anything else compelling you that I really needed to now, as we say, I needed to bring this to the forefront because you've talked about it. It can be violent. It can be violent.
Yeah.
Death, right? A timely demise of someone who had a spark, a light in their eyes that had hopes and dreams, and now they're resting in a morgue or resting in a ground and resting in the ground
Mhm.
because well, he chose or she chose, but there are other choices being made. Why illuminate this? Were those two stories just it, or is there something else that comes from this?
Yeah. It's important for people to know that my film Hazing does not focus on Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated solely, and it does not solely or exclusively focus on any of the Divine Nine organizations. This is not about the Divine Nine. This issue is about hazing in American culture more broadly, and that is one thing that I felt compelled to make sure um, came out
Mhm.
as people watch this film. Um, I felt like it would be extremely irresponsible for me to make a film about hazing that only focused on Black Greek letter organizations.
Mhm.
I think that's what many people expected this film to be about because I'm a member of a Black Greek organization, a Black Greek letter organization, I should say, and because I'm a Black director.
Mhm.
But it was always my intention to make a film that transcended race and gender, and on some level class as well. And we talk about the deaths that occur from time to time. Actually, it's not from time to time. It's actually every
Often.
year.
Yeah, it happens
Every
very
year,
often.
someone dies from hazing. But there are many more people, black, white, Asian, Latinx, um, women, who are deeply impacted by the trauma associated with hazing, the emotional trauma, psychological trauma, the physical trauma, if they survive the physical abuse or beatings. And so I just wanted to tap into that. I just wanted to uncover it. I wanted to talk about it. I wanted to unpack it. I wanted to make a film that was going to force people to address it, to think deeply about our experiences, whether it's something that happened 30, 40, 50 years ago, or whether it's something that's happening right now. People have been, since I made the film, people have been sharing articles with me
Mm,
that they see, that they come across that are related to hazing. Just the other day, there was a story that broke. I believe it was in the Boston Globe, of a potential hazing issue at Harvard University on the women's hockey team.
wow.
Right. Um, Bowling Green University has a hazing case in which the parents sued the university and the fraternity for $1.6 million. I think it was actually more than that. But the point that I'm making is that this is far from exclusive to Black Greek letter organizations. And I just wanted to uncover it. I just wanted to take a look at the issue and see if the film can make an impact on saving lives, but then also changing hazing culture, which is very, very, very difficult to change.
Yeah. Yeah. Brother, I appreciate that because I'm sure my revolutionaries are like, Charles, you've got somebody out on the show now who's talking about hazing. This seems to be off the themes of being revolutionary or me finding my way of transforming my life.
Mm,
Revolutionaries, I want to put it in context as you're thinking about who you are and your revolution. We say this all the time that your revolution is not just for you. Think about that fourth tenet of fulfilling your revolution. That it's not just for you. And we think about what Brother Hurt just said is that being compelled to make this film on hazing illuminates an issue that is happening across our country. And that if we don't have voices, revolutionaries, that people that will stand in front of us in times, then who are we as a population of people?
hmm
And that's what I think about this, right? As you're asking and answering this question, what's your revolution? Knowing that you should be doing something that is not just for you. And I'm sure that there's the internal work, there, all the different things that Brother Byron Hurt had to go through to say, finally, I'm going to make a film about something that has been a part of American, world history. Hazing and induction has been a part of, is a historical context for as long as people know. But now, because of the lethality, I'm going to say lethality, if that's the correct word, that we need to illuminate that. Think about what you're doing in the world, revolutionaries. Who are you standing in front of, right? To make sure that they have an armor. And that's what men of Omega do. We stand out in front. And sometimes, even in controversy, we stand out in front so we can shield other folks. And I want you to think about that. So, Brother Hurt, I want to say thank you for having the courage, right? Because if you go back, I'm just going to make this one statement. If you go back to 2006 and hip hop Beyond Beats and Rhymes, you also took on something tough and hot, right? That folks were like, "Yo, I might come for his neck because he's telling a story,
Yeah.
right? He's telling the tea." But if
Yeah.
you don't have courage, you can't change people's lives. You can't even change your own life. So
Mm,
that's what I want you to take away. One, why we're telling the story of this acclaimed documentary filmmaker is that you have to stand in front and have the courage sometimes to take all of the arrows so those people come behind you can actually move forward. So, dear brother, I thank you for that. Let's dive a little deeper into the film, and I want people to go. Do me a favor, Byron. You said there's a screening coming up, and I know there's a couple virtual screenings that are coming up. Tell people where they can see it if they want to do a deeper dive with family members and friends.
Yeah, so if anyone listening is or watching is in the Los Angeles area, I will be in California, LA, on Monday, March 20th, and I'll be screening the film at the Media Done Responsibly Film Festival, which is going to be taking place at Cal State LA. So that's where I will be showing the film on Monday. That's an in-person screening, but the film is actually screening virtually. Um, on pbs.org/hazing film. If you just type in PBS and hazing, the link will come up and you'll be able to watch the film there.
Gotcha. Thank you. You all did. I want you to make sure you heard PBS, right? Nationally,
PBS.
public broad.
Yes.
Right. This is how big this brother is. You please understand that. And I love the humility and humbleness of this his brother. The first time I met, I'm thinking, and I'm just going to tell a little story. I'm thinking I've done all the research on Byron Hurt. He's a bruh. I'm thinking older bro. I'm showing deference. This is my big brother coming in and everything. And I'm thinking one thing, and I'm thinking the bruhs and a little hyper masculinity. Bro, you're one of the most humble people that I know. You
Thank
know, out
you.
here in the world doing very, very big revolutionary things, but one of the most humble people that I know, and it comes through in your affection, you know, is wonderful because you're doing amazing things, and I definitely appreciate that. Let's dive down again because I want to know, right? And I want my revolutionaries to know, what did you learn from making this film? By
Mm,
hearing the stories of people who have been affected, right, by hazing. And I say this because I say this before you answer your question, is that I often think as a psychologist that hurt people are hurting people, and
yeah,
we are couching it under the guise of this is an induction into an organization or a beloved organization that I had to go through this,
yeah,
and so to be on my level, you need to go through this too.
yeah, yeah.
So, what did you learn from those families and people who have experienced hazing?
Yeah, it's so funny that you mentioned that, brother, because I was just exercising around the corner from my house at the track, and I was thinking about this whole topic of trauma, right? And I was thinking about what I experienced and what so many other people experience, regardless of where they experience, if they've been hazed and there was some physical abuse there or emotional abuse or psychological abuse or what have you, it probably stems from some unhealed trauma that they experienced at some point earlier in their life. You can't really cause harm to someone without having experienced some kind of trauma that you are reproducing in some way or that you are projecting outward. And so that's one thing that I learned. I learned that, a lot of what takes place when it comes to hazing is, people who have been desensitized to violence
Mm,
or emotional trauma or physical trauma or some sort of psychological trauma. And so the people that they're inflicting the harm to have been dehumanized, right? We
mm,
dehumanize people to justify abusing them on some level, or we justify it by saying this happened to me, and
mm,
so you have to go through what I experienced, or we justify by saying this is a part of the tradition, this is what's going to make you good, this is what's going to earn you respect and credibility among the fraternity or the sorority or the athletic team, or your academic club, wherever it is. So that's one thing I learned, brother. And I also learned that the parents who live with the impact, the toll that is raised by hazing, they live with that forever.
yeah.
We look at a hazing headline or we see a hazing story in the news, but we never really think about the ways in which the parents of these young people and their lives are forever changed.
Yeah.
So I've been able to establish some really great relationships with many of the participants in the film, who I've gotten to know, and I see the hole that exists
Mm,
in their soul forever because of what they experienced. Something that could have been prevented. Something that someone could have stood up and stopped if they had the courage to do it, if they um, if they were more aware about the deadly consequences, or even the psychological consequences of hazing. So that's another thing that I learned. And then the last thing that I learned is that hazing is just so widespread. There's hazing in almost every arena that you could possibly think of,
Right.
where there are newcomers coming into a group. So yeah, it's deep, brother. I learned a lot.
Yeah.
We could sit here for a whole half an hour talking about some of the lessons that I learned dealing with this
Right.
stuff.
Right. No, I appreciate this. Um, and I say that the appreciation is that we don't, and I'll say I don't because I don't like to, not personally, I don't want to speak for anybody else. And I think
Mhm.
about this is that in the mix, I'm not thinking or wasn't thinking, right? And in the mix, I'm not thinking about the potential trauma experience or experience or that the potential trauma that I may be inflicting.
Yeah.
Um, and so older, wiser, you know, thought provoking questions that I'm asking myself now is that why? Because but that thought process about what what might this do to someone else's long-term mental health?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's thought about on a very, very conscious level. I don't think that it's thought about. I think because it's going to get to my next question is that we talk about legitimization,
Hmm.
that process that it legitimizes regardless of the organization, regardless of the sector. There's
Yeah.
a legitimization of the process if you go through and make it through, right? The hazing process to become a part of whatever
Mhm.
organization. And that's the quote that kind of stays with me, from the outset of the documentary is that hazing legitimizes the process, not only during but afterwards. But here's what it made me think. It made me think we go through so many racial and cultural barriers. Why do you think that this divide, being hazed or not being hazed, continues to exist? And I'm gonna actually contextualize this. Continues to exist in these communities where hazing is maybe prominent.
Well, I interviewed a brother named Judge Adrian. Adrian. I'm not sure if you know brother Judge Adrian. And in his interview, unfortunately, it didn't make it into the final version of the film, but in his interview, he talked about how, most people don't want to be hazed necessarily. They want the respect that comes along with going through a process in which there was some sort of physical or emotional test that is associated with hazing, typically associated with hazing. And I thought that was really powerful because at the end of the day, especially when we're talking about men, is that we are always looking for validation, credibility,
Mhm.
to be sort of given that stamp of approval
Mhm.
by other men that you're good, right? That you are worthy. And there's something about this age-old process that many people before us have gone through in various iterations or various forms, that makes young people say, I want to go through that because I want to earn my way into this space. I want to test my mettle. I'll speak for myself. When I was a young man, in my late teens, early 20s, I wanted to prove to myself that I had what it took, right? To be a man, to go through the process and become a member of the same organization that my uncle, who was a
Mhm. Yeah,
scientist, a doctor,
exactly. Mhm.
went through, right? I wanted to see if I had what he had, right? Um, I later learned that my uncle was anti-hazing. He was very much against hazing, from what he told me once I was initiated into the organization. But I mean, I say all of that to answer your question and say that I think a lot of it is about validation, right?
Yeah.
It's about earning one's place within the group or the organization because we want to be validated by that process. And we
Mm.
know that the only way to get that validation is to go through it, is to endure it. Now, again, I shouldn't say again because I haven't said this yet, but I want to make it clear that I pledged in 1990, which is a long time ago,
Yeah.
right?
I'm 94.
The process has changed, right? You know, our fraternity in particular has outlawed hazing. You know, the organization is decidedly anti-hazing, and there's serious penalties and consequences for those who participate, whether you are the perpetrator or the victim. And I just want to make that very clear.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for
That does
saying that.
not that does not mean that it doesn't still happen, right? And it doesn't mean that we're the only organization where it happens. It happens throughout, you know, fraternity and sorority life, you know, when it comes to Greek life. And so I feel a certain responsibility to help in the process of changing the culture.
Mm.
And, you know, changing the culture of hazing is very difficult. It's not easy. If it was easy, it would have been done already,
Mm.
right?
Right.
It is a very um, you know, it is hard to change or shift. Let me say that one more time. The culture of hazing is very difficult to change or shift. One, because so many people still buy into, you know, this idea of pledging, you know, which in many ways is just a euphemism for hazing,
Mm.
right? And so because we hold on to it, we hold on to the tradition, and because we believe that going through that process brings value to incoming members, we refuse to change it.
Right.
But what I would like to focus in on is what I learned once my film was released. Once my film was released, there were so many brothers who stood in solidarity with me, who
Mm.
stood in support of me and this film. Many people did it privately, bruh. Many people reached out to me via email or text or DMs on social media, right? Or picked up the phone and called me, right? And shared with me their experiences. They shared with me how they had been traumatized by the process that they went through with hazing,
Right.
right? And it wasn't just brothers in our fraternity. There were brothers
Across
in
the board.
A Phi A. There were brothers in Kappa Alpha Psi. You know, I ran into a brother at a train station in DC. You know, who walked up to me and approached me. He was a member of Kappa Alpha Psi, and he told me he watched the film. He thanked me for watching the film, and he told me that he was so concerned about his son, who was about to go off to college, and he knew that his son wanted to pledge Kappa. He was very concerned about his son's safety,
Right.
right? I've had, you know, members of AKA Delta Sigma Theta. I've had white fraternity members and sorority members reach out to me and share their stories with me about the trauma that they experienced. One of my former teachers reached out to me and told me that he was hazed when he pledged fraternity in the 1960s, and he said that he cried. He he sobbed as he watched the film on PBS because it brought back so many memories and so much pain. So, you know, I think that the film has the ability to do healing work,
Mm. Okay.
right? To get
Right.
people
Right.
to come to terms with what they experience and to confront it and to grapple with what happened to them.
Right.
You know, I had one brother who reached out to me and told me that he watched the film 2 times. His wife watched the film 3 times, and one day he got a phone call from one of his pro fights who apologized to him for putting him through so much after watching the film. And he said that he cried like a baby because he needed to hear that.
Mm.
He
Wow.
needed that
Wow.
release.
Wow. Wow.
It
Wow.
was really powerful. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
called me on the phone and we had this conversation. And so I believe that the film is extremely powerful. I think the film, if once people watch it and they give the film an opportunity and they don't feel defensive around the
Mhm.
topic, right, being addressed so publicly, I think people will be touched by it and moved by it. and it could be transformative to viewers.
Right. But I appreciate that, the vulnerability of that, and that goes into one making the film and then talking about the experiences that people who have watched the film. Because I'm thinking in my mind, right? I'm thinking in my mind, the naysayers are like, well, these people that are crying, the people that are traumatized, right? Because we've gotten into this, like, almost this black and white of hyper masculinity and healthy masculinity, and there's nothing in between, right? And the people are like, well, this is my masculinity, and if you couldn't go through that process, right, or if you were traumatized by that process, you're weak, right?
Mhm.
You're weak, and so you're not a part of you can't be with me, because if you felt traumatized, you felt any certain kind of way about this, then that's your problem. It's not my problem. What do you say to those folks?
I think it's time to redefine masculinity and what is strong and what is weak, right? Um, I think that those are old definitions
Yeah.
around, manhood or what it means to be strong. You don't, just because you go through an experience where you survive abuse doesn't mean that you're strong.
Mm.
It doesn't even mean that you're a contributing member to that organization once you go through all of that. I know people who have gone through a process where there was no hazing and outstanding members of our organization.
Mm. Say it
I know
again.
some people who have gone through, a really brutal process and who are not financial, don't go to meetings, don't do any community service. Um, I just think that we have to question and challenge the idea of, what makes one weak and what makes one strong, because I think that's part of the problem. Because if your definition of being a strong person means your ability to withstand abuse, then I think that we need to examine that.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm reading this book, The Myth of Normal by Gabor Mate. And just early in the book, and it talks about, like, trauma is actually not the event. It is not the precursor. Trauma is the recurring, the memory, the physiological response, the psychological response to the event.
Yeah, I've heard
And
that. I've
yeah,
heard. Yes.
yeah, and to think about that, right? For some people, that event may not cause a ripple effect,
Hmm.
but for others, it may be the culminating factor in a long line of events that then just there's this outpouring that this is traumatic.
Yeah.
And we don't know, like, because we have legitimized a process. And Lasana Harris, that was on the show last year, who's a professor in London, who talks about dehumanization.
Yeah.
That we legitimize dehumanization every day. The best of us dehumanize someone every day. And think about that. The best of us.
Mm.
So, the rest of us, right, who are just working the world, think about who and how we're dehumanizing folks without even conscious thought. So we don't know. And how people experience trauma to be a part of it, because we are socializing. Now here comes Dr. Corporate for a second, is
Hmm.
that we are the DNA inside of us wants us to be a part of community. Our ancestors found
Yeah.
safety in community.
Yeah.
And when you were ostracized or pushed out of the community, you were not safe. And so even now, this fear of missing out. I want to be a bro. I want to be a kappa. I want to be in the military. I want to be on this sports team. I will do whatever to legitimize my process and to legitimize my space because I want to be good. And if I go into a process with already traumatized, I'm doing myself a disservice.
Yeah. Well, you made some really good points, brother, and I agree with you. Everyone is different. You don't know what traumas that people are dealing with as they're entering a process. You don't know when you're triggering somebody and their trauma. You don't know, an individual's propensity to handle what you're dishing out. If you're not if you're not discerning about, where someone is, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. And most young people are not. Most people are not discerning. Most people don't know how to identify these particular traits or characteristics in a person. And remember, a lot of the hazing that happens is among young people whose minds are not fully formed, they're not fully developed emotionally, and so yeah, they make mistakes, and I include myself among them. But that doesn't mean that we can't teach and we can't educate and we can't make people aware of the right way to do things versus an inappropriate way of
Mm,
doing things. So what's appropriate and what's inappropriate in terms of um, initiating someone into your group or your team
mm,
or your band or your sorority or fraternity or whatever that group is. Is there a healthier way to do that? Is
yeah.
there a better way to challenge people without causing harm to them?
Mm,
Is there a better way to make someone quote unquote good without killing them?
mm,
Right? And can that person still be a valuable contributing member to your organization
right,
who carries with them respect because they earn their way into the group or the organization in a way that is appropriate?
right,
And I think
right.
those are the things that we still have to figure out.
Mm,
I think those are the things that young people are creative enough to figure out. I think we, as older people, have to give them the space to create new traditions that are not causing harm. Because a lot of times we don't respect them because they didn't go through whatever process we went through or something that looks like what we went through. And so it's no different than the old football player who looks down on the new generation of football players because the quarterback can't get hit from the blind side, or you can't hit the quarterback below the knee, when you're sacking them because of player safety
rules
or
change.
quarterback safety, or you can't hit someone above the shoulder with your helmet because it's called because you're causing, or you could create some sort of head trauma, right? We have to let go of the old ways and make way for the
Mm,
new ways that are going to be safer for individuals to thrive and to be contributing members to our organizations. And if that's not enough to convince you, we have to understand that this is a new day and that our organizations, most organizations, cannot survive these massive lawsuits that are coming along with some of these unlawful deaths, that are taking place. So I mentioned earlier the lawsuit by Stone Fulton and his family that was settled for $2.9 million. That's a lot of money
that's a lot.
for any organization to bear. And so we have to look at what's in our best interest. And I know most organizations do that anyway. But aside from the fact that we live in a litigious society where our organizations could be sued out of existence, we also have to be mindful of the human side, and not dehumanize people when they die or they get hurt or get traumatized in some
Yeah,
way.
yeah.
And we disassociate ourselves with the act that led to that. We have to take ownership over the
Mm,
culture that exists that is creating an environment where young people are in harm's way. And we have to, actively change the culture, and we have to create space for new leaders who are courageous, who are vocal, who are intelligent, who are creative, to lead the way forward in a way that's going to be less destructive.
yeah, brother. I want to thank the brothers of Omega Psi Phi who think critically about this. And our current Grand Boss list, brother Ricky Lewis, is a wonderful thought leader uh, in this space and really thinking about how to lead not only Omega Psi Phi fraternity, but also be a beacon of light for other fraternities and organizations across the world. Um, it is interesting because my thoughts were around organizations have to revolt and evolve. Right? We think about the first tenet of revolution is thinking about how do you revolt from what you are and evolving into something that you need to be in a healthier, more revolutionary version of yourself. And organizations have to take that on as well. And organizations are nothing without the individuals that are a part of them. And movements begin with courageous people like yourself, dear brother. That's what happens. Movements begin when people say that I am going to do something that moves people to revolt from their behaviors. Because if you don't know, if nothing is brought up, dear brother, if nothing is illuminated, if nothing punches you in the gut, the status quo remains. And let me say that again. If nothing punches you in the gut, the status quo remains. And if you don't get punched in the gut like this documentary does, you're not going to revolt. You're not going to evolve, because you said it in the purest form. Organizations do not have the money to pay out for untimely deaths,
Yeah.
because people wanted to be legitimized by a process. That's the simple nature of it. I don't care what organization that you're in, but that's the simple aspect of it, dear brother. You know, and so finding ways to bring folks together through a process that allows them to come together to love the organization. And I know both of us love our organization without a doubt.
Absolutely.
Right. This dog tag is worn every day. Right. My
Yeah.
father, Spring 49 Theta Psi. The
Spring
house is littered. Literally littered. I have to go through littered with artifacts and shirts and outfits and everything of Omega Sci-Fi. We love the organization.
Yeah.
Love it. And want to make sure that those who are coming behind us have the same love for the organization that we do. And that goes for Kappa Alpha Psi, that goes for the Army, that goes for the sports scene, that you can look back at your experience moving through with reverence, and that you can also, and here we go, you can also reach back. You can also reach back and say, I'm going to bring you along with me because I experienced this, and it was a joyful, loving, community-filled experience, dear brother. I want to move this conversation, and thank you. And I want folks to make sure that they're going out. All right, pbs.com/hazing. Make sure that you're checking out the film, this wonderful documentary. But back in 2006, this brother again took on a tough.
Let me stop
Go
you.
ahead.
I'm sorry. It's pbs.org.
pbs.org. There you go. That's right. They are a nonprofit.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. They want your donations too. pbs.org.
Yeah.
But you took on another topic, a tough topic, hip hop beats and rhymes. And I just want to ask you this one question. Has hip hop changed since 2006 and you made that documentary? If so, how?
Well, that's a good question, and I'm not sure if I'm the most qualified to answer that question. But I will say that I think in many ways hip hop did change, and in some ways it did not change. I mean, hip hop is still pretty much a corporate um, product, right? I mean, it is has been fully corporatized and it has been disseminated and distributed globally. And so the bottom line is still um, you know paramount. So I think some of the issues that I explore in Hip Hop Beyond Beats and Rhymes still exists. I think the sexism still exists. I think the objectification of girls and women in hip hop still happens. I think that there's less homophobia in hip hop than there was. I mean, there's been more space created for those who are non-binary, who don't identify as heterosexual. I think that has there's been some shifts happening there. I think the sound has changed quite dramatically since the film, since back in the day.
Right.
And I think thematically, I think some of the focus of the music has changed. But I say I'm not the best person to really speak on that because I'm not as connected as I used to. My life has changed. I have changed personally. I
Revolted
have
and
grown,
evolved. Right.
dramatically. I listen to the artists that I like to listen to.
Right.
And we as hip hop fans have more control of who we listen to and when. That
Yeah.
didn't really exist as
Yes,
much,
that's true. That's
when
true.
Hip Hop Beyond Beats and Rhymes first came out. So I live a little bit in a silo, and in a bubble, because I get to just kind of insulate myself with all of my favorite hip hop artists and all of my music that I like to listen to, including some new music and new artists that are out there. But I think for hip hop to truly change, I think the whole corporate structure has to change. It has to be more it has to be more self-governing when it comes to disseminating music that glorifies certain aspects of Black
Right.
life and Black culture, that reproduce a lot of stereotypes about who we are.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I feel, and probably this is comical. I feel like my father when hip hop was coming out, right? My father, yeah, my
Yeah,
father was, my father was 1929, so hip hop is its entree was in the 70s, and so he was probably in his 40s, uh, 40s and 50s, really as hip hop. I feel now like my father then, like what is this mess?
yeah, I
You
hear
know what I'm
you.
saying? Like,
Hear you.
what is this? I'm still listening to Run DMC and LL Cool J before, I'm still listening to Before I Let Go.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm listening to old school stuff that's still. Look, Chuck D's voice is still hit. It still
yeah,
hits home. Most
yeah,
Def, Rakim. I'm still listening to that because that's what resonates with me. But I'm a 51-year-old man. Yeah, Revolutionaries. I said it out loud first time.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
but I keep wondering. I was like, I want to ask Byron this question because you made this film really that really touched. And I remember those young women from Spelman. When I
yeah,
when I watched that and really talked about the experience of men and the impact of hip hop on men and how men were treating them. It was really, really, hearing Black women talk
hmm,
about their experiences of masculinity, their experiences with masculinity, and attributing that to what was going on in hip hop and what brothers were seeing, right?
hmm,
And I think that with the onset of Instagram and Facebook, we are still seeing sexism and misogyny happen, um, and how we're socialized and how we're socialized. We see images of women, curvy, curvaceous, beautiful,
hmm,
luxurious women all the time, and then we gawk, we gawk and we sexualize, and that's also a part of the culture.
yeah,
And so it's really, and then we just have so much that we imbibe
hmm,
now that hip hop has a place in it, but there are other entities that are influencing how we interact with each other,
yeah,
especially from a cisgender heterosexual nature.
yeah. Well, you know what? My goal was never to change the hip hop industry per se. My goal was to change the lens and the ear of the viewer, the consumer. That was always my goal, was to raise awareness about these things. We talked about desensitization earlier, right? And how people are dehumanized. People are dehumanized in music as well. And we become desensitized to the put downs, of women, of gay and queer people, of other Black people, through music, in ways that we may not do it if it was coming from the dominant group,
Yeah.
that's being, that's talking about us in pejorative ways. So, I mean, I've been heartened that over the years, many people have, told me that the film changed their life, or that the film changed the way that they listen to hip hop, or made them question the misogyny in hip hop, or the homophobia in hip hop, or whatever those things are. And I'm also, heartened to know that people are still showing the film. Educators are
Yeah.
still showing the film
Yeah.
on college campuses and in high schools. I mean, film is older now, but it's still resonating with
Mhm.
audiences, and it's still triggering discussion. And that's, as a filmmaker, that's really all that you can hope for, is that something that you created transforms people, or gets people to think, or creates a conversation, which pushes awareness. That's really all I want to do as a documentary filmmaker.
Right. Right. You know, yes, yes, and I want Revolutionaries. I want to make sure that you understand that Brother Byron Hurt is an award-winning documentary filmmaker. His litany of films are Hip Hop Beyond Beats and Rhymes, Soul Food Junkies, Barack and Curtis, I Am a Man, Black Masculinity in America, If 50 Shoots, and his last film that we just spent uh, quite a bit of time talking about, Hazing. And so I want to make sure that you go out and make sure that you're learning about what this brother does and take some time to really look, listen, and as we say, like pass this work on, because what Brother Herc has done is that he's pushed the envelope for us. He's made us aware of who we are and how we show up and how we have legitimized processes that may not be legitimized, should be legitimized. What's the internal work that we actually need to do to actually show up better for other folks, to be the armor sometimes, to be the voice out loud when people for the voiceless who can't speak. And so I want to say that. I just want to say that out loud, that the work that you've been doing, bruh, the litany of work is amazing. And so I want to make sure my revolutionaries are going out and watching and actually like showing and talking about this work. Before we end, man, we started something new a couple episodes ago. Brother, I asked you to pick a number 1 through 5.
5. That's my
5.
number. That's my
Okay.
line number.
I love it. I love it.
Number
Um,
5.
so I got to make sure, because my staff is gonna be like, you didn't ask him the question. I'm gonna ask you the question. But what's the next iteration of your revolution?
Mm. Well, I'm still trying to figure that out. I have a lot of films left in me. There are other stories that I would like to tell as a filmmaker. I would love to teach.
Yeah.
I would like to pass on what I've learned as a documentary filmmaker, and I have learned many, many lessons. Now that I have gotten some experience completing films, so I think that there's a new horizon out there for me. I think at the end of the day, I'm a creative person. I'm a creative, and I want to be more prolific as a storyteller and put
Mm,
really powerful films out into the universe, and to leave a legacy that outlives me. I want to be like my mentor, Stanley Nelson. I want to be like, Sam Pollard. I want to be like Dawn Porter and Pete Nix and Yoruba Richin and all of these great, talented filmmakers, Joe Brewster and Michelle. What's her last name? Oh my gosh.
not in Degio Cello.
I just no. I
I'm
just
just like,
Michelle Stevenson. I want to be like Joe Brewster and Michelle Stevenson. I want to be like, my peers, who are out there who are making films and telling stories about Black people,
yeah,
about Black culture, really pushing the envelope and moving forward.
I got you. I got you. I appreciate it, brother.
You'll be able to edit that, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. I
All
got
right.
you. I
All
got
right.
you. Here's the question that I really, really need to ask you. Byron
Sure.
Hurt, award-winning documentary filmmaker. My brother, my dear brother, what's your revolution?
My revolution is redefining masculinity.
Mm,
Through
simple.
my work as a filmmaker, as an activist, as a writer, as a thinker, my revolution is to use all of the tools at my disposal to help redefine what it means to be a man.
Mm, I love that. This is why I do this show, brother. This is exactly why I do this show. Revolutionaries. Look, this show is going to be fire for you as you listen and think about like how you making the most of your revolution and how can you stand in front of folks when necessary. How can your revolution be not just for you, but for someone else? And that's what Brother Hurt has been doing. I thank you for spending some time with me today. I want to thank my team, Seiko and Sarah, and the addition of Speedy, who takes care of everything from our YouTube channel now that will be up. Um, so just want to thank my team for all that they do to make sure that the What's a Revolution show is moving and growing and revolutionary in people's lives. Brother Hurt, we wish you well as you move forward in your revolution and the iterations of your revolution. If there's anything that we can do here to illuminate your work, this platform is not just for me, it is for
Mm.
the people that come on this show. And I'm so grateful for you, so grateful for our membership and our beloved organization and what we do and how we uplift the principles of manhood, scholarship, perseverance, and uplift, dear brother. So
Absolutely.
thank you so
Long
much.
live the Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. And I just want to thank you, brother, for giving me a platform, for giving me an opportunity to share what I've learned through the process of making the film. I want to thank you for your show. I want to thank you for having authentic conversations with men and with women about issues that will help us become healthier as a community. I think that's really, really important. I hope that you continue to do good work. I hope that your platform grows and becomes bigger, and that you reach millions of people, with the messages that you like to spread. So thank you so much, brother. I appreciate you. I thank you for reaching out to me, and I appreciate your support.
No worries, brother. And I appreciate that. As we say, gratitude to you, dear brother. Um, Revolutionaries, I always want you to know that we are here for you, that we love you, and that we hope that you're answering what we think is the most thought-provoking question of your life. What's your revolution? We'll talk to you next time. Peace.